All right. Welcome everybody. It is 10:33, so we're going to get started. I want to make sure that we are able to get in and get out on time. I am super stoked. I'm a huge fan of the disc. Oh, mute me. Okay. So the disc revolutionized how I interacted with people. So I'm very excited to be sharing that with you guys today. I'm going to share my screen, and then I actually want to ask, and you can either unmute yourself and share it, or you're going to put it in the chat box. What is it that you're looking to get out of today's call around, and we're going to utilize the disc, and yet it really is about the communication. What is the purpose of using a tool like the disc or the KPA, right? So either unmute yourself and share what it is that you'd like to walk away from today, what you'd like to learn, and or put it in the chat box. What is it that you'd like to walk away or learn around communication that if you walked out of today with, you would be freaking like tickled pink, couldn't believe how amazing this was for you?
Olivia, I'll go. It's Ann Rosen in Chicago. I feel like I'm really familiar with the disc. However, it's always a great reminder to, first of all, know my own disc, to remember my own disc, how I show up, how I'm showing up for clients and all the other people around me. So, and then also how to either bring it up or tone it down depending on who that person is.
Awesome. And for you, today your goal would be to just refresh your knowledge?
Yes, that's a great thing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, who else?
Okay. Olivia, that would be the same for me too.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think it was Cindy, and then I didn't catch the other.
Oh, okay. So hi, it's Cindy. I'm from California. And hi, Ann. I know we talked yesterday. Actually, I put it in the chat box. I'm actually going through that right now, trying to learn how to communicate better with my team so that we perform better with each other, not, and with our clients, but we're revisiting this.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, because that is such a huge piece that we don't always take into account, that we always look at our clients, and we should. And at the same time, if you think about that fable from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People about the golden goose, and right, so we think production and production capability, so P and PC. We actually, the better we want to treat the agents that we work with, we want to treat our admin as good as or better than our clients, because that's how they're going to in turn treat our clients. And they're the golden goose, right? We're the golden goose. Are we treating ourselves that way? So I love that. All right. And then Jean, how to find people to complement my business. Yes. And that's huge. Okay. Edwina, and if I butchered your name, I apologize. Things to watch for to identify quickly the disc of a seller or buyer. Yes. That's the cool part. Disc is an observable behavior. So many times we think that we have to get the assessment. The assessment is a tool and it is very helpful, and yet it is not what we have. We don't have to have that. So love that. Anything else before we dive in on what you'd like to make sure you get out of today? We always want to make sure we start with an intention.
Well, I actually redid the DISC assessment. I remember Mark King saying that there's 3 times in life where you have to redo it. When you're go through a divorce, when somebody dies, and I don't remember what the third one was. So I was just curious to see where I'm at and how to go about whether it's moving my business forward or with my clients. Basically just an inside scoop on a refreshing, I guess, on how to do the business. And
Oh, Valerie, sorry, you just went to mute.
I also know personally that when I do go, if somebody talks to me and I'm a strong D, right, I'll just basically tune out. So I just need to be more accurate on who I'm talking to and how to go about it.
Yes, perfect. Okay, awesome. Anybody else before we move forward? Okay. All right, we're going to dive in. So, and of course, there are people on here that are not in my MAPS coaching schedule. So, Olivia Roberts, MAPS coach. So welcome. And yes, and that absolutely, it is after a death. There are definitely some, because we don't need to take the disc 15 times, because interesting enough, it's just like anything, the more we know about it, the more that we take it. Guess what? We're going to unintentionally like make it the way we want to make it. So making sure that we are being very, there's only a few times we need to take it. For anybody that's on the call, I'm going to put this in. If you do not have your DISC assessment, please don't do this on the call. But that's my email address. If you will email me, I will send you a link to the Abelson DISC behavioral style. There's other good ones, I'm sure. That's just happens to be my favorite. I find it the most accurate. And I will, I'll send you, hey, this is how to take it. Now, for those of you that are in my schedule and you took it, we are working on getting into the system to email that to you. So we should have that to you by the end of the day. So, all right, diving in, let's first look at what the DISC isn't. It is not a measure of intelligence. It is not an indicator of values. It is not a measurement of skill, experience, and is not a measure of education or training. Intelligence, it's very difficult to measure. The DISC language gives us no indication of a person's intelligence, okay? It is also not an indicator of a person's motivators. That means the why of a person's behavior, right? Why do we do what we do? Motivators are not observable. DISC, again, does not measure education and training. Many employers base their selection and promotion on education and training. That is outside the realm of the DISC model. And when we talk about it, it's not a measure of experience. Experience is one of the primary focuses of an employer indicating the details of a professional journey. Doesn't measure someone's personal skills. It doesn't measure a person's worldview, right? So the DISC doesn't do any of those things. The DISC does have an inescapable bearing on all of those things, right? So an awareness and proper application will affect all of those areas. So those are the things that a DISC is not. So why is it so important and what is it? So DISC is the universal language of how you do what you do. Research has consistently shown that behavioral characteristics can be grouped together into 4 quadrants or styles. People with similar styles tend to exhibit specific types of behavior common to that style. So that's not acting, right? That's if we're naturally a talker, we talk, we hang out with people that talk, right? Those types of things. A person's behavior is a necessary and an integral part of who they are. So that goes to the nature inherent versus nurture. We won't really get into that. And yet the DISC model merely analyzes behavioral styles. That is, again, the person's manner of doing things. And then this is the big piece. The DISC language is neutral. It is neither good nor bad. It just is. I cannot stress this enough. I'm actually going to have y'all take an oath in a minute. Don't be that guy or that lady. And I've been that. oh, I'm a D, oh, I'm a C, or I'm a, no. The DISC intent is to help in communication. By me saying, like, especially somebody that's not studying or has studied the DISC, by me telling them a letter and then or telling them what their letter is, there's no communication happening there, right? So I just be really aware it is neutral. There is no good or bad. I've also seen this where an agent will take a DISC and they say, well, I'm not a fit for XYZ. I can't be successful in this business. Get over that too. That has nothing. It does not. You can be a winner in every role as a D, an I, an S, and a C, right? Like, so let's make sure that we don't prop ourselves up or make or tear ourselves down or make somebody right or wrong because of the DISC. It tells us some things, and yet it is not. It's neutral, neither good nor bad, right? And then always remember, people don't like to be labeled. The DISC language, when understood and used properly, is that silent language. So raise your hand. I know this is silly, but repeat after me. I will not use my DISC to compare or defend my actions. Y'all got all that, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, really, like, I'll have people, and look, and I've been guilty of this. So I'm not like, this is me talking to myself here to go, well, I'm a blah, blah, blah. That's why, like, that's a D move, right? I will not openly refer to people or myself as a high or low DISC. Your turn. I will not openly refer to people or myself as a high or low DISC. And I know that's silly, but that's one of the challenges with this. And it's a lot of times it's because we're excited about it, we're learning it, and then we make it something that it's not. So just remember that this is a silent language when we're discussing it. A person's behavior is the sum of the intensity of all four factors. So DISC, and we're going to go, for anybody that's not 100% familiar with this, we're going to go into what that stands for. We all have DISC. It's just, where do we show up on that intensity? And on your report, you'll see a line. And so we say anything over the line, all that means is that's what you lead with. It doesn't mean you don't have anything else. We all have DISC. It's just, what do we lead with? So these are some language rules. Use and discuss the DISC language only with those who know the language. Exhibit your knowledge of the language by knowing your behavioral style. So this is the other piece. And again, been guilty of this. When you get your DISC, actually read it. Don't just look at the two letters and go, whoa, it says, if you're this behavioral style, this is how you communicate with this behavioral style for optimum communication. These are the things that you should not do. Really study that and understand yourself. That's where really the power of this comes in. And then rule 3, teach others the language in a setting where appropriate time is available for understanding, right? So with your staff, with even clients, you might want to we used to do a class at church around the DISC. So teach it, just not in a conversation of, oh, you're this, right? So why do we want to learn the DISC? Increase communication effectiveness, decrease tension and stress, right? There's tons of reasons that learning the DISC. Number 1, gaining commitment and cooperation. People tend to trust and work well with those people who seem like themselves. The most effective way to gain the commitment and cooperation of others is to get into their world and blend with their behavioral style. Now, want to make sure that, because sometimes we hear this and we think, well, I don't want to be fake. Look, if you come to my house and you drink Pepsi, which I do not, I'm going to have Pepsi in my refrigerator because, right, I want to influence you. I want to make you comfortable, right? It's the same thing with the DISC. It's not being fake, because it is noticing and then going, okay, how do I best communicate with that person based on what I know? And it really is about, I want to make that other person comfortable, meet them where we are, where they are, and then come forward. It's effective in building effective teams. People tend to be too hard on each other, continually judging behavior, right? If you run a team, or have a family, or you just are a person in this world, I'm sure at some point you have said, or you have heard people like really berate somebody. I can't believe they did blah, 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 blah. And you maybe have a different perspective. So we're really hard on each other. When we do this, and team development tends, team development tends to be slowed or halted due to people problems. An awareness of our behavioral differences has an immediate impact on communication, conflict resolution, and motivation for the team. So that's a huge piece. And then resolving and preventing conflict. So understanding style similarities and differences will be the first step in resolving and preventing, and that's my favorite word there, preventing conflict. By meeting the person's behavioral needs, you will be able to diffuse many problems before they even happen, right? People prefer to be managed in a certain way. That talks about, that's family members, that's clients, that's people on your team. Some like structure, some don't. Some like to work with people, and some prefer to work alone. The DISC language can teach you more about a person in 10 minutes than you could learn in a year without the DISC, right? And it's also, and this is really, really important, number 4 is gaining credibility or influence. Some people call this endorsement, and yet every interaction you have with a person either increases or decreases your credibility, your influence, right? Think about it. Have you ever met a person who won't stop talking and relates his whole or her whole life story to you? Then you see that person coming, you might dread that interaction. If so, it's because their behavior has caused them to lose influence with you. Therefore, that person does not get the benefit of your time. Now, conversely, a person you can't wait to see daily has gained your endorsement, or they have influenced you, and therefore deserving of your time. The DISC language allows you to stack the deck in your favor. By knowing a person's behavioral style, you can immediately adapt to their style and gain endorsement, right? Leadership is influence. We all probably have that person in our world that you meet them and you just feel like they gave you a hug. How come? They have complimented, whether it's just something they've naturally done or they've learned, they've complimented your style. So this is why we want to learn about the DISC. And of course, increase sales. Now, prerequisites of the DISC. You must desire to identify your strengths and be willing to look at possible limitations in your behavior. You must have a desire to bring out the best in others to win through people focus. In other words, there's this quote by Judy Suter that says, if you desire to change others, you first must change yourself. Are you willing to go there? You've got to learn yourself, or this, right? So what relationships will be enhanced? Family, work, customers, clients, friends, like the bit. And we're going to skip through this piece. So that again, if you haven't completed one or you don't have one, email me, subject line DISC. We will send you one. Those that have done this, we will go ahead. You will be getting that. And then, hey, Brian. All right. Now, so what is the DISC? Now, the D, all the D means is how you approach and respond to problems and challenges and how you exercise power. That's it. Some people approach it by being very direct. Some people approach it by, being less direct. I mean, for lack of a better explanation there. So how you approach it and respond to problems and challenges and how you exercise power. That's all the D means. An I, influence. This is how you interact with and attempt to influence others to your point of view, right? So if you're on the low I spectrum, you're going to work on influencing people differently than if you're on the high I, if you're on the high spectrum of the I. Steadiness, or S, steadiness, consistency. So this is how you respond to change, variation, and pace of your environment. And C is compliance, how you respond to rules and procedures set by others and to authority. The key point is set by others. We all like the rules that we create ourselves. Even us, even if you're a super high D on the spectrum or you're high I, we all love our own rules. It's how you respond to rules and procedures set by others and to authority. Okay. Everybody exhibits all 4 of these in varying degrees. Okay. So the ability to adapt your behavior to each of the styles will increase the effectiveness in communication, allowing for greater understanding and appreciation of similarities and differences. Okay. Now, the big piece here, there is no right or wrong. That's a non-issue. D is not better than I. S isn't better than a C. Every behavioral style brings strengths and weaknesses to situations, right? So let's look at today. We're going to be, and I want to make sure that everybody hears this at a high level. Most of us, and what we're going to be focused on today is when we're talking what we call pure behavioral styles, this represents a very small percentage of the population, okay? The behavior of most of the population is a combination of 2 or more styles. Therefore, when we reference somebody merely as a high D, it's useful only in describing their core behavior, right? And that's the factor that's the highest above that energy line. So keep in mind that today, what we're going to be looking at pure behavioral styles. As I was getting ready for today's class, I realized that most classes, this is what we do. And so we don't get the nuances because, again, pure high D, like only your D above the energy line is about 2% of the population. Pure high I, right, above that energy line is only 1%. Most people being that combination, we don't talk about it a lot. So sometimes we are making assumptions because we're not combining those. So I am going to do a second class. I will let you guys know. And and the people who's, if you coach with somebody else, I'll be letting your coaches know, or email me and I'll let you know a date on this, so that we can start talking about, well, what if you're a DC? How does that impact your behavior, right? Or an ID or an SC or a CID, right? Because that changes these things a bit. But for today's purposes, we're going to be keeping it simple. So we're going to talk about the pure behavioral styles. And yeah, I want to make sure you understand that there's nuances in this. So a D, descriptors. If you're taking notes, make sure you write this down. A D's goal is to win. Now, that doesn't mean that a C's goal isn't to win or an S's goal. Their goal to win is coming from a different place than a D, right? So just keep that in mind. The other piece is the emotion of the emotion of a D is anger. A high D will tend to be quick to anger and have a short fuse. So a person whose D factor is low will be slow to anger and have a long fuse. The higher the D on that quadrant, the shorter the fuse. By observing the intensity of the D's emotions of anger, the D factor can be quickly assessed as high or low when you're observing someone. Now, keep in mind, a D typically they exhibit and it's quick to anger. They don't typically hold grudges. Now, again, we're talking about pure and everybody's different, but it's more of an emotion. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Now, interesting enough, so if your maybe a behavioral style is an I, and we're going to talk about your emotion and your fear in a little bit, when somebody acts angry and you perceive it one way without the context of this, you can make it mean something about you, right? And then it becomes this barrier between them versus going, that's just the way they process. Now, With that said, please hear me. That does not give anybody the right to walk around going, I can be angry, I'm a D. No, like there's a whole nother word we could call you if you said that line, right? If you don't know, you know, so keep in mind that and sometimes if you're a D, you might beat yourself up because something happens and you hit a short fuse. Know yourself. Remember that you always have that, right? There's a moment of decision between stimulus and reaction. And yet when we look at operating with a team, it might be having a conversation if that is, you know, if you're a D, to go, hey guys, when something hits me, you know, you might see it on my face or you might see it on my body language. I'm going to pause and I'm going to react, and it has nothing to do with you. Of course, we're not going to scream and yell and holler or anything like that, but just keeping that, you know, in mind. The D fear is being taken advantage of. Now, if you think about that with working with clients and you're negotiating a settlement, you're negotiating a house, and that person says they aren't going to take advantage of me, or maybe it's not the exact words, but you feel that some of their pushback. All right, that's a D, right? So those are some indicators of, okay, that's what is happening there. Now there's, and if I happen to miss any of these, feel free to stop me. And if y'all have questions during this, it's very okay for this to be interactive. My cyberbacker is going to monitor their chat box. If you would do me a favor and, you know, if we make sure every slide or so, if we've got comments or questions, just interrupt me and we'll address those. And then anybody else, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. There's a couple of others when you think about a D. Now, again, we're talking about the pure, so there's nuances that we'll talk about later. How do you tell if somebody's a D? By just looking at them. So let's say that are like some indications. So if you go to list a house and you drive up and there is a big white or black truck, find out who owns that. That's probably a D. High Ds typically drive a black or white vehicle, and it's large. Now, the reason I say all of these things, you always got to keep in mind, there's caveats to everything. Maybe maybe somebody gave them a vehicle, and so they drive a small car. Maybe they're influenced by their other factors, the ISC, and so they but that's a kind of a cool way of, and so I would ask this question: how many of you already know your DISC language, and you are a show of hands here, or unmute yourself and say I, and you know that you lead with your D and you drive a big vehicle and it's white or black? Brian, myself.
Me.
All right, awesome.
I don't drive
Ralph, George.
big vehicles. I'm a truck
Does
girl.
the silver SUV count?
Yes, right. Now, again, and the reason I always have that caveat of it's not 100%, but it's a good indicator to go, ooh, let me pay attention, right? Let me, the other piece is, D's typically, they're the person, when you meet somebody, you're like, that was rude. They may just be a D. That wasn't their intention to be rude. I remember we were at now if you're a D and you're on this call, because it's about being a better communicator, knowing yourself and knowing that you have the propensity to do this, now you go, okay, how do I train myself to not be like this? So the first time I ever taught a DISC class, this was, oh my gosh, 2007, long time ago. And one of the interesting things afterwards, our director of first impression, who is one of the coolest people you will ever meet, has since went on to be a phenomenal agent, top agent in our office. And after I did this, she said, oh my God, I'm so glad you taught that class. Now, I about broke off my arm patting my back because, yeah, I was good, right? And then she said this. Is D's right? Ego. No, we all have ego. Don't that's more of a joke. But she said, yeah, I thought you didn't like me. What do you mean? She goes, well, every day. Now she's a high I. So as we look at the high I, you'll understand this. Every day I walk into the office, I might nod at her, but I'd just go to my office. And so every day, basically, she felt like I was slapping her in the face because she's going, hey, Olivia. And I'm like, and because not understanding the behavioral styles, she didn't know to bring it up. She just thought I didn't like her. And can you imagine if that was a client or, well, I don't want her to feel like I don't like her, but how those things can impact our world that we're not even aware of because we're not studying these pieces. Now, once I knew that, I made a conscious effort, and she also knew that it was just, that wasn't on my radar, but it wasn't about being rude, right? So that's the power of these pieces. Yeah, so that's a little bit about just how you can spot somebody or some of the things that you can use. Okay, so the other things, these are some famous high Ds. We're going to go really fast on the rest of this stuff. Barbara Walters, Hillary Clinton, Cher, Donald Trump, Charles Barkley, Gary Keller, Mark Cuban, Fidel Castro, Lee Iacocca, Michael Jordan. Those are some famous high Ds. Outstanding characteristics of the high D, they need to direct. They have an inherent need to direct. As extroverted persons, high Ds will usually give their opinion in clear, specific language. If a group or discussion is moving a little slowly, expect the high D to step up to get the plate and push that group along. Given the authority and responsibility, high Ds can take you to new heights previously were considered impossible. They like to be challenged. There's a desire to win. Again, all of the behavioral styles have a desire to win, but it's just how it shows up. They are direct communication. They're usually the person that walks up and goes, hey, what's going on? Right. And you're like, well, who are you? Like, could you give me your name first? And they're often comfortable in high risk situations. So some observable indicators. So feel free to take a picture of the screen. And like I said, we'll get deeper in this on the next call. And I want to make sure that I cover all of the behavioral styles here. They're extroverted. They're task-oriented. So DISCs are task-oriented, not people-oriented. That doesn't mean they don't like people. It's just they think task, not people, right? They are direct. Their overextensions is they're impatient. They're geared to or looking for results. Ds will sometimes say, no, just tell me the CNN version. Spit it out, right? Don't do that. It's rude. And yet that we just like, come on. A high D emotion, anger, short fuse, a low D emotion. Like, so when we talk about that, if you're on the low spectrum, you're slower to anger. These are some things. Buying, quick decision makers. They like new and unique products. Got a brother that's so funny. I remember when the first iPhone came out, and he's a super, he's on the high on the D spectrum, and bought an iPhone. He ended up giving it to me because he had no idea how to work it. But he buys every tech thing there is because it's new and unique, and he doesn't know how to turn them on, right? Because that's what they're attracted to. Change. They love change. The conflict response is to fight back. So again, knowing that. So if you've got a client that's fighting with you, that's their conflict response. It's not about you. So then you go, okay, how do we say it this a different way so that it's not, right? They drive fast. They're always going somewhere in a hurry. It doesn't matter. It's Sunday, got nowhere to be. We got to get there fast, right? When you walk into their office, they're status conscious. They got large desks. It's about efficiency. Their email writing, direct and to the point. It's results oriented. You ever get a text back from somebody after you send a paragraph and they text back K? Probably a D, right? Their gesture, a lot of hand movements when talking, big gestures, right? All right, so those are some observable behaviors. The last few of the observable behaviors for D, goal setting. They set all kind of goals, usually high risk and not written down. Like this is in the natural, right? And we're talking about the pure without any of the influence. Organization, they're efficient, not neat. They usually read executive book summaries. Give me the pop points, right? Risk factor, they're high risk takers. Rules, they may tend to break the rules. The end justifies the means. Okay, like D's are going to be the people that walk, they're going to church or going somewhere and they walk through the grass, right? Because it's faster versus staying on the sidewalk. They're typically forward leaning. So again, when we look at how can we quickly observe somebody, are they forward leaning? Stress relief, physical activity, preferably of a competitive nature. Okay, that's where we typically stress relief. And then talk on the phone. So these are some ways. They're direct. While others are talking, they may be doing other activities. They may interrupt or jump to their next response. When they're talking to others, again, direct. While others are talking, they may do other activities. Same thing, right? And then walk fast. They're always going somewhere. They might not know where they're going, but they're going to get there fast, right? So any questions when we look at the high D? And then we're going to zoom a lot faster. I took a little bit longer on these first pieces just to kind of, because again, we can dive further on all of the behavioral styles on the next call. And I want to respect your time because it's make sure that we get you off on time. So what are your takeaways? What did you learn differently? What did this remind you of? Let's take a couple real quick.
I have a question, Olivia.
Yes.
If it seems like more people are D's, and I clearly, just by description, I'm clearly a D, but so do D's butt heads? Is there conflict?
Yes, absolutely. And keep in mind the reason why we feel like in our industry, we feel like there's a lot of D's is because we're in the real estate industry, but there's actually the majority of the world actually lead with SC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's the other thing that if you're pay attention to who you're selling to, because we tend to sell to people that are like us. When we learn this language and we open up our world, we can actually double our business because we're going to be able to sell and communicate to people that are not like us.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we have a false sense in the real estate world that, oh, everybody's a D. No, it's not. It's not true.
Okay.
But it's a great question because that I'm glad you brought that up. All right, let's take one more.
Olivia, quick question. When I'm excited to retake the disc because the last time I took it, which was years ago, my D is way below the line and I show up like a D all the time. So how do we address that, or how do we make ourselves aware of that?
So this is the interesting thing, because remember, we all have these things. We all there are times that I'm going to show up as a high S. There are going to be times because we all have these. It's what we lead with. Interesting enough, an SC behavioral style and even an S can show up as a D. So I want you to imagine that we're on a sinking ship and mama grabs their kid and they start, and they're getting to the front of their line. They're taking care of their kid. You might think in that moment they're a D. No, an S is going to take care of other people, and they are going to absolutely look like a D sometimes because of the motivator, because of what's going on, right? So it really isn't because that's what, when we think about this, if we're not careful, we go, well, I show up that way or show up that way. We're all going to everybody on here. I don't care how, let's say, high D you are, you can be in the right circumstances extremely what we would think of a high C. Like you can fill out paperwork and cross your I's and dot your T's. It may not be comfortable. It may not be, but we're smart enough to do any of it. It's just, So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it may be the what is the word? It may be the influence of the DSC or the combination of that is having you appear to be a D.
Well, yeah, and when I have to show up, which is often, I have to show up. So it's some of that behavior is natural D behavior. It's just a matter of how long can I stretch, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's where, like, because this is the other interesting thing. So like, let's say that you're low on the spectrum as a D. So you're maybe not as confrontational naturally as a D is, which, and funny enough, Ds don't like confrontation either. Mostly they don't even realize they're being confrontational sometimes, right? So it's different than being intentional about it. And yet if you're in a situation, you're running your business and you need to have a certain conversation with somebody, again, it could appear to them that you're confrontational. No, it's, you knew that there was something that you needed to do. And that's where, right. So, yeah. Okay. So we're going to move fast now. Cause again, we're not going to cover all of these. Later, we can talk about the value of the D to the team, the ideal environment, communicating with them. But let's hit, and even motivators, and managing them. And yet let's go straight to the I. So the goal of the I is to influence and persuade. Their emotion is optimism. The higher the I plotting on that graph, the more optimistic the person will be. High I's believe the impossible can be done and will hold incredible optimism as to the future. Sometimes people refer to them as cheerleaders. If you're an I and somebody refers to you as a cheerleader, please take that as a compliment. We need people that have optimism in our world, right? Now, interesting, remember when I said if a D says something, or if you're an I, you may look at it and it hurts your feelings and they're mean to me and that type of thing. It's because that I's greatest fear is rejection. Right? Want everybody to like us. So the I's greatest fear is rejection. Some famous I's, Robin Williams, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Will Ferrell, right? Outstanding characteristics of the high I. They need to interact. They need to be liked, involvement, and emotional. Some observable indicators. So they're extroverted. They're people-oriented. They're typically indirect. Their overextension is they're usually disorganized. They are fun. They like experiences. Their low emotion is pessimism. Like if you are low on the spectrum, I typically is a lot of optimism. How do we identify an I? If they're a gentleman that has a lot of jewelry on, like not just a wedding ring, but they've got a lot of jewelry on, that's probably a high I. The same with women. Big earrings, typically a high I. So those are some flashier clothes. Now, again, you got to remember that this is if we're looking at the, they only had this because the other ones give them different nuances. But those are some indicators, right? Are people that drive red cars, sports cars, those types of things, those are typically high I. So that's, again, those are some ways that you can identify them. And they also have lots of big gestures, lots of facial expression when they're talking, right? When they're writing, when you read an email and it's lots of words, there's a lot of focus on people, probably an I. When they're driving, they're looking around, radio on, right? Like, woohoo, they're still having the party in the car. So that's when we look at, just some quick things to see. And their decision makers are usually showy products, impulse buyers. Okay. I's goal setting. Intention is present, planning is not. They're typically disorganized, a lot of piles. They like to read fiction and self-improvement books. They're moderate risk takers. may not be aware of rules and break them unintentionally. So can you think about within your team structure or your family structure, you might have somebody that is that I and they're breaking all these rules. And if you're a rule follower, you think they're doing it intentionally or doing it to you, right? So this can help us get out of that, that cycle of that. And then stress relief, interaction with people. So like you take COVID and eyes, that definitely was a challenge because they weren't able to interact with people the way they used to. So if you need stress relief in your high eye, what are you getting that interaction? What are you doing to deliberately do that? They talk on the phone, long conversations, and talk to others verbal at length. They may have poor listening skills. Okay. And when they walk, they're weaving, people focus. Oh, right. That type of thing. So, like I said, I know that went through those pretty quickly, and yet I want to make sure that we cover all of them before we wrap. Any questions or thoughts on the eye? And again, we'll go through all of this on another call, but what any thoughts around or questions around the eye? Nothing?
Definitely accurate.
Definitely accurate. Yeah. And yeah. So, and does it, some of the tips to identify, like, is that helping to be able to say, okay, you know, they're wearing, you know, flashy clothes. That's probably an eye.
That's so helpful because it's just a quick,
Yeah.
here's something quick.
Yeah, it just, and it starts that communication, right? It's just not 100%. Because think about many years ago, remember when it was the style for like men to wear the jeans and they had all like the flashy stuff on their butt? Anybody remember those? Maybe that's just a Southern thing. You know, like they had intricate designs. I can't think of the name of the jeans. One of two things, that guy was a high eye or his wife bought his jeans. Right. So just, but it can give you a place to start. Okay. So S, descriptor, steady, stable. They're introverted. Their goal is to be steady and supportive. They're enthusiastic, trusting, charming, popular, gregarious, independent, influential, confidential, open-minded. Now, their emotion is non-emotional. Now, hear me when I say this. High S's are very emotional. So why do we say non-emotional? It's because they have an inherent ability to mask their emotions. So this is not a good person to play poker with. You'll probably lose, right? You won't be able to read their facial expressions. It doesn't, like they're very emotional. It's just that they don't express their emotions. So that is what that looks like. The strong side of this trait is that a high S can build a great team while going through tough personal events. The weak side of this trait is that internalized emotion is not physically or mentally healthy. So high S's will open up and share their concerns with people they trust, okay? And their fear is loss of security. So this is one of the things whenever we hire somebody to work in the admin position, and let's say that admin, again, this is rule of thumb, it's not everything, but that we've got that admin that comes in and we're agents, we're okay with high risk, whatever, at least somewhat of moderate risk. And we go, oh, we'll pay you when we have closings. And they're like, they want the security. Dave Ramsey talks about it in one of his books. Like you could literally lose a great admin person or that person in that role to somebody that pays them less money. And yet it's stable. It's steady, right? Because that fear of that loss of security is really important to them. So famous high S's, former First Lady Laura Bush, Fred Rogers, Jimmy Carter, Gandhi, Tom Brokaw, Charlie Brown. Outstanding characteristics: need to serve, loyalty, patient, relaxed. They have long-term relationships and they really like closure. Okay. Some high S observable indicators: introverted, they're people oriented, they're indirect, The overextensions is possessiveness. They're geared to stability, and we talked about their emotions. They are slow decision makers. They like traditional products. They do not like change. They need much prep for that. Conflict response, they will tolerate or put it up with it. But you got to remember, they may not show their emotions, so you might not even know that there's conflict. They drive, relaxed pace, no hurry. They decorate an office with family snapshots, homey atmosphere. They long letters giving lots of information. They do gesture with their hands, but it's not large, right? When we think about what an S behavioral style looks like, if we talk about a female, they may wear earrings, they may wear jewelry, they may not, and they're typically not wearing the bigger ones. Now, again, that's just a rule of thumb because maybe their friend gave it to them or whatever, but just kind of they're probably not, they may not wear, again, when we look at a female, they may not wear makeup, or at least not very much, right? They're probably a muted color car, and it's probably a smaller car. Again, there's other factors, but that's a quick tell. Their goals are typically short-term, low risk. They may use daily to-do list. They usually have some type of a system. It is a little on the sloppy side, but they do have some type of system. They like people stories, fiction and nonfiction. They're moderate, low risk takers. Will usually follow time-tested, proven results. They stand leaning back, hand in pockets, and their stress relief is rest time and sleep, hot baths. That's how they refuel. They're warm conversationalists on the phone, friendly, concerned. They talk to others. They're warm, not pushy. They will listen before talking. And when they walk, they're typically a steady, easy pace. Okay. Now let's hit the C's really quick. As I move through getting to the C slide, anything that you heard or questions around the S behavioral style?
So I'm curious to know, now that you're identifying the S, I know a lot of my friends are S's. Is there a complementary, like DS or something? Are there letters that are complementary?
Most of us lead with more than one. Most of us are like lead with 2 or 3. So like you're a DI or a DC or an IS. Some of us are. So mine is mine is a DIC.
Mhm.
I usually tell people CID, so it doesn't spell that. But so typically we lead with 2 or 3. And that's why there's nuances to what I'm sharing that we'll get into on a later call. Yeah. Now C descriptors, compliant, correct. That's supposed to say correct, not current. They're introverted. Their goal is to avoid conflict and comply. They're perfectionist, they're courteous, mature, accurate, conscientious, evasive, fact finder, restrained, precise. Their emotion is fear. They like to do things by the book. And their fear is criticism. So if you have, if you're can identify them, how you say something. So you might say something to a D like, oh, that sucks. If you said that to a C, they could very much internalize that and think that you were saying that about them, not about XYZ, right? So just being aware of that. Famous high C's, Monica Geller, Diane Sawyer, Spike Lee, Kevin Costner, Al Gore, Sherlock Holmes, right? The way Isaac Newton. So do you see, like, the big thing about this is you can win with any behavioral style. It has nothing to do with, it's just that how you get there may be different and what's important to you may be different. Outstanding characteristics of the high C: need for procedures, by the book, perfectionist, precise and attentive to detail, sometimes evenly more so. They like proof and evidence. So like if you tell a high C, when you do this, you'll get a 15% return, they're going to say, prove it. If you say that to a high I, they might go, oh, that's awesome, right? So right? Do you have that evidence? They're introverted, they're task oriented, they are direct, overextensions, they can be critical. They're geared toward procedures and information. Their high I emotion is fear, no fear. I also want to say this because sometimes I've seen when we're learning this language, again, remember we promised at the beginning, we wouldn't use this to beat anybody up or ourselves up. The first NETA millionaire in the Gulf states at Keller Williams was a high C. So I just want to, Tanya, Cal Carter. So there are, right, so it's just when you know yourself, it's easier for you to go, okay, I might do it differently than this person. So I gave you my behavioral style. One of the things that when I first got into real estate, I was trying to sell real estate like my brother and my sister-in-law, married to a different brother. They were both DIs and their eyes are really high, and they do it through people and warm and friendly. And that's what I thought I had to do. And antidepressants and lots of this is what? When I discovered when I really paid attention to who I was, and it was, okay, I'm a teacher, I'm a this, consultants. I was the first one in our area that got a showing partner because I was freaking great at getting you into the office. But if I had to spend all day with you doing small talk, I wasn't getting out of bed the next day. And yet that allowed me to be very successful by knowing what worked for me and connecting that. So this is the cool part about those pieces. Yeah. Okay. And then there are very slow buyers. Now, this is the interesting thing. They are slow buyers until they're not. A C has done lots and lots of research, and when they're ready to buy, boom, they're going to, you may think they're a D because they're ready to buy. I had a friend that I was asking this, he's very high C, and he says he researches buying cars. Like we were talking about a car. He's like, oh, I've researched, I walk on the lot, and they start talking to me. I'm like, no, I just want to buy that car. No, that's how I do it. So in their mind, they'd be like, oh, this guy's a D. No, he's just done his research, and he is direct, and he just wants to buy the car. Let him buy the car, right? They follow rules. They are typically the best drivers. They decorate an office with graphs, charts. It's very functional. They're direct and to the point. They have appropriate data. They're very reserved, little or no gestures. C's, typically not flashy dressers, well put together though. So this is going to be the gentleman that has his clothes are pressed and ironed, tucked in. Definitely, very, very, I'm going to say clean, but what I mean by that is like, you might have, think of this, even if he's a mechanic, but he doesn't have any grease under his nails, and his clothes, right? Even he put on overalls where he went to work. So his clothes didn't get, that's probably a C, right? So that's one way so he's a good dresser, but it's not flashy. That's probably a C behavioral style, okay? Their stress relief is alone time. So if you're married to a D or to a C, you might make sure they get some alone time. It'll help, right? Or if you're in a relationship with the one. Okay, little chit chat. They're to the point, maybe short or long, depending on the data needed. They are direct, questioning, clarifying, and they walk in a straight line. They do have somewhere to go. All right. So I'm going to pause there because we are right at 11:32. So I apologize. We're over a few minutes. I've got some availability right now, so I completely understand if you have to drop off. But I would, for those that don't, I'd love some feedback. What are you learning? At the beginning of the call, we asked you to identify what it is that you wanted to take away. Did you take that thing away, or is there a question you would like to ask me or the group to kind of continue to move this forward? Who wants to go first?
I have one question. If you have two or more that are high numbers, what would you consider that number to be high? Like a 70, 80, 90?
No, anything over the energy. So if you look at the DISC assessment, and you have, or if you look at the paperwork, there's an energy line, anything over, even if it's barely over the energy line, that would be, so if you have a D that's way over, an I barely over, then those are the three that you lead with.
Okay.
I've been to a lot of DISC classes, I guess. I've never heard this information that you've given me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. 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 That
I
makes
think it's really important as realtors to know this, because by knowing this information, I mean, when you go up to a client or, a customer, you can kind of figure out what they are, who they, you know what I mean, why they're doing the things that they're doing, why they're asking the questions they're asking, and you can better understand it versus taking it personal, like, why would they say that? Or, you know what I mean? It's like understanding where they're coming from so that you can better help them.
Yeah. And not, and the cool part is not, because remember we talked, as humans, we're judging all the time. Like that's
Right.
saves our lives. And if you have that client that's like wants 10,000 little pieces of information, if your behavioral style's opposite, you could be like, oh, they don't trust me or they think I'm wrong. No, they just need information. You're making it mean this. And then that's putting a barrier. And we also talk about, like, a lot of times we've been talking about the 7 habits of highly effective people and being more efficient and effective. Well, if we know somebody's that behavioral style because of observation, we've really internalized this, we go to that listing presentation and we're talking their language, right? So we're bringing more information. If they're a high I, we're going to bring, we're not going to bring out the charts and graphs. We're going to have a conversation. So absolutely, Daisy, you're dead on. That's the important piece. That's how it really all connects.
And I feel like by knowing this information and knowing who you're speaking to, because I think by having, pre-qualifying people before you ever even meet them, you should get a pretty good idea of what they are. So I feel like this kind of knowing this information gives you an advantage, because when you get there, you're ready to serve them the way they need you to serve them.
Oh, I love this, guys. Daisy, absolutely. So everybody write this down. So we are all familiar with the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I want you to think of it a little bit differently, same meaning, and yet we say do unto others as you would have done unto you. We sometimes think it's the same. So I want a lot of information, so I'm going to give them a lot of information. No. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So find out, like, what you want is for somebody that's working with you to find out what you do and compliment you, bring you that, right? Same flip side of that. If Jorge needs this, I want to do unto him the way that he wants to be done unto, right? So that absolutely, Daisy, that's part of that customer service that we can provide. Love that. All right. Anybody else? Any question that you wanted to get answered and didn't get answered, or any other thing that you got from today's call?
Is this going to be on a PowerPoint? I see it's recorded, so we can get that.
Yeah, it's you'll be able to get the recording. It's actually on, we'll end up uploading it to the YouTube. For those that are in my coaching schedule, you can get that from in your open source or in your hub. There's a link to the YouTube channel. For anybody else that's on this call, if you'd like to get the recording, email that Coach Olivia Roberts, and I would be happy to shoot you an email of the recording. All right. Anything else? All right. Perfect. So this will be a little bit of homework for anybody that would choose to accept this. This week, utilizing some of the things you learned, start identifying. Don't tell them, right? You're not going to go home and tell your wife, oh, you're a high I or you're a C. That's why we fight. That's why. But start kind of going, okay, that person's this. Go back to your disc and go, how do I communicate effectively with that person? Okay, let me do that and see how that works, right? But that's just to actually bring that into our world versus it just being a tool, okay? All right. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about or say before we close? Going once, going twice. Checking the
I
chat
think
box.
someone had asked about getting the slide deck. Is that possible?
No.
Okay.
No. And yes. No. So no. Now with that said, I don't feel free when you watch the thing to screenshot the heck out of it, right? I'm just not going to share my slide. I hope that's okay. All right. All right, that is where we will end. If there's anything else that you guys need, you've got my email address, you've got my phone number, call me, email me, text me. I will let you guys know when we do a second one and go a little bit deeper. And that way, if you'd like to take advantage of that, you can. All right. All right. That's my time. You guys have a great email or great email. Gosh, great day. See ya. Bye.